Hello, I would like to welcome you to this presentation on managing mental health during social distancing and social isolation. This is a really difficult time for many people right now. We have a lot less contact with people, and that really brings a unique set of challenges to managing our mental health and caring for ourselves. So we have to kind of be intentional about recognizing that things are very different right now and that we need to interact with the world and ourselves in maybe a little bit of a different way. And we're going to be exploring some of those ways that maybe we need to pay attention to things and looking at some of the obstacles to really caring for ourselves in the way that we need to, given the social distancing and social isolation that's going on right now. So let's take a look and let's begin by talking a little bit about the current situation. First things first, we just want to acknowledge, this is a really tough time for most people. With the pandemic going on, it really feels like this is a time when we need people the most. And unfortunately, we actually have less contact with with family and friends and people during the period of time when we need them the most. And we'd really like to offer you this warm welcome to this PowerPoint presentation. We're going to offer some pretty simple just thoughts and suggestions, definitions and explanations for stress and anxiety and depression, and really managing managing our mental health during a really difficult time of our lives. So feel free to get comfortable, grab a snack or a cup of something tasty, and again, feel free to take notes or write questions as they come up. Our objectives for this presentation are, number one, to increase knowledge about the current situation. And this is not deep, detailed knowledge. This is just kind of a brief overview and a review of definitions and kind of a brief explanation of what's going on and why this presentation is really necessary. Number two, we're going to learn about some of the effects of social isolation and how to connect with others. And number three is learning some skills to manage anxiety and depression that may result from the social isolation. And number four is some current resources that are available for you, both to help manage stress and anxiety, but also really to be proactive. And what can you do to care for yourself now so that maybe you don't become stressed or have so many symptoms of depression? So let's take a look at a few definitions here. We've heard a lot about these three terms here, a lot about social isolation, a lot about quarantine, and a lot about shelter in place. And I want to be upfront kind of right off the bat here that all of these terms have somewhat different definitions depending on how exactly you're looking at them, both from kind of a legal perspective, psychological perspective, and really what they mean to you. But I have three that I'd like to explain kind of in depth and why I chose them, because I think they're really important to look at. So the first is this social isolation, and we've been hearing so much about social distancing, kind of keeping our distance from people physically in order to prevent the spread of the virus. And with social distancing comes this social isolation. It's just kind of impossible to get around because we are not obviously having that close physical contact with our friends and our family. We really have a lot less contact. And this is a definition from the American Psychological Association that social isolation is the voluntary or involuntary absence of contact with others. Social isolation often produces abnormal behaviors and physiological changes in both humans and animals. Quarantine, and this is a definition from a really recent article, a 2020 article on the effects of social isolation and quarantine on people. Quarantine is the separation and restriction of movement of people who have potentially been exposed to a contagious disease to find out if they become unwell. So it reduces the risk of them infecting other people. And shelter in place, this is actually kind of a legal state-by-state definition. And this is defined in Michigan anyway, by the Michigan Executive Order number 2020-21, which states that temporary requirement to suspend all activities that are not necessary to sustain or protect life. And you can take a look at that link there and learn more about that particular definition and more about the law and more about some specific things going on in Michigan. So why do we have to social distance and therefore kind of be more socially isolated right now? It's a really difficult time for all of us, and we really have to do our part. One of the first things we can do right now is to be helpful to everyone is to follow the advice of medical professionals and really take good care of ourselves. Because a lot of the social distancing is not so much about you who may be healthy and young or maybe not. Of course, maybe you might have some health concerns, but it's really for the good of everyone. And this really isn't just about ourselves anymore. We're doing our part to support everyone, doctors, nurses, professionals, people that stock and deliver our food, and kind of everyone here. This is all about kind of taking care of everybody else and ourselves. And research shows that really understanding more about the reasons behind being asked to do some social distancing and kind of being a little more isolated can make the process feel more empowering and collaborative. So I really encourage you to find a trustworthy source of news and do some research, stay up on the latest, and kind of find out why you're being asked to do some of the things that you are. So in this 2020 study that reviewed a whole bunch of research from the past 10 years about the effects of quarantine and social distancing, there are a number of mental health concerns that came up for some of the individuals who were social distanced and quarantined. And they really run the spectrum of just about every mental health concern, from stress, anxiety, depression, detachment from others, poor concentration, trauma, irritability, anger, frustration, insomnia, fear, numbness. Again, really kind of running the spectrum of concerns. It's really important to remember, however, that this is not to say that you have or that you will have a symptom or any of these symptoms. These are really only possibilities. Everyone responds to events differently, and stress and anxiety are really unique and individual. What may be stress to one person, kind of social distancing and spending a lot of time by themselves, might actually be seen as something that's a positive to someone else. Having some time to do some introspection and to do some mindfulness and reading and work and connecting with people on the phone. It's not to say that everyone's going to experience stress, but I do recognize that many people will experience this as very stressful. And what's really important here for you now is just to simply recognize how you are responding and if you need to take any action to take better care of yourself. So in the next few slides here, we're going to take a little bit more of a deep look at what stress, anxiety, and depression are, and we're going to review some skills to manage these concerns for ourselves during these difficult times. This is not an in-depth look. This is just kind of a broad review of some basic stress, anxiety, and depression management skills. Let's take a look specifically at stress. So stress is a normal part of everyday life. Stress is actually necessary for humans. It motivates us. It gets us moving. We can see in this is called the Yerkes-Dodson stress curve. In the green and yellow section, stress is actually a good thing. Stress pushes us. Stress motivates us to get out of bed in the morning. It motivates us to study for that test. It motivates us to do better in our athletic performance. It motivates us to get some exercise and get out of the house. So this normal stress helps us to accomplish tasks, and this is called eustress, E-U-S-T-R-E-S-S, eustress. That's good stress. And that's distinguished from bad stress, unhelpful stress, which is often called distress. And we can see the distress once stress kind of hits its peak, and it's that optimal level of stress that's pushing us to accomplish the things that we need to accomplish. But after a point when there's too much stress, we become overloaded. And that's where we become tired, fatigued, exhausted. We have anxiety, panic, anger. And really, once it becomes too stressful, too much stress, we begin to break down and just kind of burn out. So unhelpful stress, that distress, it involves a persistence and intensity that's beyond what's useful to motivate us. And it actually begins to interfere with our functioning. So stress that's no longer helping us to push and motivate us, but it's actually interfering with our ability to accomplish the things that we need to accomplish. So this is an important slide here, and this is something that I really want to take a little bit of time with. These are some signs that you might be experiencing distress. And we're going to look at 4 basic domains or areas that we need to maybe focus on. We're going to look at emotions, we're going to look at thoughts, we're going to look at behaviors, and we're going to look at body, our physiology. So let's take a look at some emotions that we want to be aware of. Anxiety, fear, moodiness, irritability. And this is not by any means an exhaustive list. There's many others, frustration. What are the emotions that let you know that maybe you're beginning to become overstressed and beginning to come into that distress section? Let's take a look at some thoughts. Inability to concentrate, forgetfulness, worrying, having low self-esteem. Those are the thoughts. It could also be kind of the way that we think, that inability to concentrate. Let's take a look at some behaviors. And again, not an exhaustive list, but here's a few of some of the common ones. Crying, grinding your teeth, using drugs or alcohol more than usual, changes in appetite, having no appetite or eating more than usual, procrastination. And let's also take a look at some physiological signs, increased blood pressure, increased heart rate, sweating more, muscle tension. Think about what are the cues that your body is telling you that right now you're feeling very stressed, you're feeling overly stressed. So resilience, this is a great word to keep in mind here. Resilience is the capacity to withstand stress. Being resilient means learning to work through the emotions and effects of stress. Resilience develops with improved awareness. So that's that last slide of how do you know when you're becoming stressed. So once we have more awareness, we're more able to build resilience and kind of recognize when we're stressed and that we need to do something about it. And so resilience develops with that increased awareness, with stress management skills, and with supportive relationships. So resilience is something that we can get better at. This is an important thought. This is an important thing to remember. We're not just born with a resilience level of 3, and this is the level of resilience that we have for every single situation from the time we're born until the time that we die. No, we can get better at being resilient. We can learn skills, and we can practice these skills to gain resilience. And we can build resilience through stress management. And stress management, just like resilience, is a learned skill. It's the ability to maintain control and functioning when situations, people, and events make those excessive demands on us. So let's take a look at some stress management skills, managing stress and anxiety. So here are some stress management steps that we can remember. Recognizing what's going on, committing to making a change, stepping away, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that one because it sounds a little counterintuitive, but getting a little perspective, evaluating, and then continued self-care. So let's take a look starting with number 1, recognize. Step number 1 is recognizing. So this is that awareness, recognizing when you're stressed and how it's coming about in your life. What are your first thoughts and emotions and cues that stress is building up and needs your attention? Thinking about you right now, here's a question for you to think about. What is your first physical cue? What might be that very first thing that your body starts to say, like, hey, I'm becoming a bit stressed right now? Is it maybe your hand tapping the desk? Is it maybe your knee shaking up and down when you're in class? Are you maybe breathing a little bit heavier, or what is it for you? So step number 2 is committing to doing something about this. Once we recognize and we're aware that there's something going on, we make a commitment to do something positive about it. And again, I use that word positive because we're not committing to using drugs or alcohol or running away from it completely. We're going to actually do something that's going to be beneficial for ourselves. So the first step is really asking, what is this stress telling you? Not overusing or abusing substances, and really avoiding extreme reactions and catastrophizing, like, oh, the sky is falling, the world is ending. Setting an intention to listen to the stress and act over and over again. This isn't a one-time commitment. This is every single time that you feel stressed, making a commitment that you're going to do something positive about this. Step number 3 is stepping away. So this is kind of temporarily stepping away, if possible. And this isn't running away. This might sound a little bit sort of paradoxical or confusing, but we're not running away. We're just taking a moment or two to give yourself some perspective about the situation. Being intentional about taking some time to move away from some of the stressors, decompressing, and kind of clearing your thinking. This is, if you're driving down the road at 100 miles an hour and you hear something that's wrong with your car, there's no way to check your engine as you're driving 100 miles an hour. You need to maybe pull the car over, turn the car off, and take a look under the hood. And give yourself some perspective, maybe even calling someone else to help out. And then once you do recognize what the problem is, making a commitment to return to the work once you're feeling more present and things are a little bit more safe and comfortable for you. Step number 4 is evaluate. Being aware of what you can change and what you can't. So again, this is kind of like that metaphor of the car. Once you stop the car and pop the hood, evaluating what is it in here that you can change? What is it in here that is possible for you to make a difference on? Maybe your car needs some oil and you have some oil and you're able to put a little bit of oil in and keep the car going and just kind of zoom right off. Or maybe it's something really major. Maybe some part of the engine is cracked or completely broken and you just can't fix this right now. And this is something that's kind of far beyond your ability to fix, and you need to call someone else and get some help. Learning to say no sometimes. Is there some way that you can say no to some requests of your time and your energy? Breaking tasks down into chunks and taking things one step at a time rather than trying to accomplish the whole thing right away. Step number 5 is self-care, and this is all about developing a regular self-care practice, and that means being intentionally engaged in practices that nourish you and leave you feeling recharged. I really like this idea of you can't drink from an empty cup. So it's not this kind of forced one-size-fits-all way of kind of forcing yourself to feel better. This is something that should feel comfortable and relaxing and kind to yourself. Self-care creates balance and maintains health and prevents burnout. So it's going to help you to be healthier, happier, and more effective at handling stressors. So we're going to take a look at some specific self-care strategies later on. So why don't we just take a break since we're talking about self-care here. I'm taking a tiny little break from the presentation and from the information. Here's a picture of my dog. His name is Shadow. He's a lot of fun. He's got a lot of energy, a lot of life. He was a really cute little puppy. So let's just, again, take a deep breath and take a few moments, and we'll come back in a minute. So this is something that there's a little bit of a nuance with, this idea of stress and anxiety. A lot of times both of those words are used interchangeably with each other. I'm feeling a lot of stress right now. I have a lot of anxiety. I feel a lot of anxiety. I have a lot of stress. I think it's important just to very briefly kind of differentiate them and remember that stress is just your pattern of response that you have to an event. A lot of times stress, again, can be good, can be positive, can motivate us to accomplish what we need to accomplish. Anxiety is worrying about a future event, something that has not happened yet. Feeling of anxiety is often related to feelings of worry, of having distress or physical symptoms. And the danger can be internal or external, some future event that is perceived as dangerous or uncomfortable. So anxiety is these feelings of worry, apprehension, fear, panic, in response to situations that seem overwhelming or threatening or uncomfortable. And it's important to just remember that anxiety is really incredibly common. It is the number one concern that clients come to counseling for, especially clients in a college counseling center. 41% of college students struggle with anxiety at some point. And I don't know the exact data right now, but I would assume much more, a much higher percentage of the college population and just the general population is experiencing a lot of anxiety right now, given all of the changes and all of the things that are going on right now. So, and sometimes that can be helpful, recognizing our common humanity, that we're a part of a group of other people, and we're all kind of in this together, and we're all experiencing a lot of anxiety right now. So there's a couple different types of anxiety. This is not meant to be kind of diagnostic or an exhaustive list of all of the different types of anxiety. This is just kind of a broad overview of some of the most common types of anxiety that people experience, especially college students. So looking at generalized anxiety, this is worrying about pretty much everything all the time, having a constant low-level, baseline level of anxiety that can certainly go up and down depending on certain circumstances, but it's kind of like always there. It's always kind of hanging around. Panic disorder is characterized by having panic attacks, having those moments of acute stress that with things like heart racing incredibly fast, sweating, feeling nauseous, lightheaded, feeling impending doom, some of the symptoms of a panic attack. And that's a specific type of anxiety disorder. Having some social anxiety, and this is worrying about other people negatively judging you. And this really comes into play, obviously, when we're around people or feeling in situations where we have the opportunity to be judged by other people. Test anxiety is just kind of what it sounds like, having difficulty performing on quizzes, tests, or exams, having specific anxiety tied to those events. And then there's a specific phobia, which is extreme fear of a specific situation or object. And this could be something like arachnophobia with spiders, or having a fear of something, thunderstorms, or could pick your pick. There's a phobia for every single specific object or situation. So let's transition just into a little bit of a talk about depression. These are some common symptoms of depression. Again, this is not meant to be in any way diagnostic, or if you have a certain number of these, I think that you should be concerned, of course, but don't try to give yourself a label or diagnose yourself or anyone else. These are just for you, things to kind of think about and say, maybe I do experience some of these things, and maybe I do need to take a little better care of myself, and maybe even I need to reach out to see a counselor right now because this is getting really bad. So low mood, sadness, apathy, loss of interest or pleasure, changes in sleep, and that could be both getting too much sleep or not sleeping enough, changes in appetite, eating too much, eating much more than you usually do, or you're not eating enough and having a more or less desire for food, lacking in energy or feeling fatigued, intentionally withdrawing socially, difficulty concentrating, hopelessness, low self-esteem or worthlessness. And if you're having any of these thoughts of death or suicide, please see a counselor immediately. immediately. You can always call 911 or call the National Suicide Prevention Hotline, which is going to be linked to at the end of this, this PowerPoint. But please reach out to someone if you're having any thoughts of wanting to hurt yourself or someone else. So some thoughts on managing depression. Again, I don't want to make this some comprehensive list. This is just some basic, simple suggestions and offers to you to kind of help to manage some symptoms if you are experiencing some symptoms of depression. And they're really tailored to the period of time that we're in right now. So let's take a look at some things that may be contributing to depression. And remembering always, we need to remember, number one, what is in your control? What is in your ability to control? And what is not in your ability to control? And that's a really important distinction because, I mean, I would ask you this question. Where do you think you should spend the most time and energy? Things that are within your control or things that you have absolutely no control? Big societal things, things that are not in your control. I think for most people, the answer is pretty obvious, the things that are within your control, because those are the things that you can change, you can make better. The things that are beyond your control, you can't. It's literally the definition of it. It's things that you can't make better. It's things that maybe we need to learn to accept right now, or maybe things that we can recognize that right now are beyond our control, but maybe might become more in our control later on in our lives. So number one of the biggest things that is within our power to control is how much we use of drugs or alcohol. And if you're experiencing depression, reducing the amount that we drink or the amount that we use drugs is just about invariably going to be one of the most important things that we do to manage our depression. Really, if we're not able to completely eliminate using drugs or alcohol, reduction is, again, going to be one of the most important things that we do in managing depression. Getting more physical activity. I'm getting some exercise right now, going outside. Despite the social distancing, we can still get some walks in and get some runs in and do whatever it is that we can to get a little bit of exercise right now. And even if we're not able to leave our homes, there's some resources. The YMCA offers some free exercise activities, and there's lots of cool stuff on YouTube like yoga and self-guided exercise activities. Eating regular, well-balanced meals. And you can see our website for some of the mindful eating activities that I'm going to be doing, and consulting with your physician and a dietitian if needed to eat regular, well-balanced meals. And this usually, means eating a variety of fruits and vegetables and grains and proteins. Again, everyone has their own unique needs, and there are some dietary restrictions, but eating a variety of whatever it is you can eat and ensuring that you get enough nutrition for you. Getting adequate sleep. This might be actually one of the few things that might be a benefit of the current situation, our ability to maybe get a little bit more sleep and sleeping in, because we're not going to work at 6, 7, 8 o'clock in the morning. We're not going to school in the way that we were. And we're able to maybe maintain more of a schedule. And this is so, so important. All of the research that says that maintaining a schedule during this time is going to be imperative to our health and wellness. So maintaining a schedule, maintaining a schedule, maintaining a schedule. And that means going to bed at a certain time and waking up at a certain time every single day to get your body in that rhythm. Because rhythm and balance are all part of managing depression and anxiety. Finding that balance. Seeking connection right now is really incredibly important. Connection and emotional support. Talking to someone that you trust, or reaching out to someone who may need a hand themselves. A lot of times this means friends and family, of course. And doing so with whatever ways we can right now. Video chatting, talking on the phone, and even mailing, mailing that letter to your grandma that you've always wanted to mail. Focusing on some of the positive aspects of life. I don't want to invalidate the fact that this is a very difficult time, but being grateful has been tied to mental health and wellness in a lot of ways. So what can you maybe be grateful for right now, even if it's something small? Your bed is comfortable, or you have access to Netflix. Doing some gratitude exercises, journaling, acts of kindness, or meditation. This is really a great time to try all kinds of new things that maybe you've wanted to but haven't had the time or the energy to do before. And remembering to pace yourself. If you are changing up your schedule, remember to do it in little bits and chunks, little bits at a time, not a giant modification to your schedule all at once. And really setting realistic goals. You're not going to go from not exercising to exercising 10 hours a day. You want to maybe plan on exercising 15 minutes, half an hour, and working your way up, not adding this huge chunk of time to your schedule. And it's going to be good for your mind and body to kind of take things slow and work your way up. And again, I just want to remember to remind you that if things become overwhelming or you're not able to manage some of these symptoms on your own, reaching out to a counselor to help you manage your symptoms. So I'm sure you've all heard and read and listened to a lot of people telling you to stay in contact with people. The general recommendation is, connecting with at least 2 people every day. And I think one of the things that's left out in the conversation is connecting in a meaningful way is always more important than connecting on a surface way. So, connecting in a way that's not just saying hello, goodbye, or, how's the weather outside, but maybe trying to connect in a more meaningful way. How are you? Asking questions like, what's really going on? What are you feeling? What are you thinking? And giving some space for other people to talk a little bit. Maybe even working on some of those skills for you can be important right now. And thinking about how can you connect in a way that's the most dynamic, having the most ability to interact with someone. And usually it's almost always going to be in person, but connecting video chat or phone can also be important. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in the next slide. So again, we want to talk about both meaningful and also connecting in a dynamic way, in a way that we get to see people, if at all possible, or hear their voices, or respond to them in real time, and kind of thinking of it like a hierarchy where, in-person connection is the best, but right now, because of social distancing and not being able to connect with people in that way, maybe looking to video chat. And this might be even a time where when we're video chatting on FaceTime or Hangouts or Zoom or Skype to practice some of our skills, because these are skills that are going to be invaluable for you both as a person and managing your own health and wellness, but also as future professionals in this kind of increasingly technologically focused world. The ability to connect with people and use technology in a meaningful way is going to only continue to be more important, not less. And kind of going through the list down the hierarchy of video chat, phone, text messaging, social media, and even mail. Mail can be incredibly meaningful if it's, if you take some time with it. And maybe writing that letter to a friend or to your grandparents or parents or maybe a roommate that you haven't seen in a while can really be meaningful and show that you put a lot of time and effort into that desire to connect with someone. Everybody really is kind of unique in this way, and this is, I guess I should have framed this as, this is sort of my hierarchy. You may feel differently, you may have kind of your own sense of what's meaningful to you, and I respect that. So I think sometimes it can be really important to look to the experts, people who are really good communicators. And This could be someone in your own life. Maybe it's a mom or a dad or aunt or uncle or friend or other family member who you know is just someone who really communicates well with other people, someone who gets their point across. But also good communicators tend to be people who can listen really well. And for me, one of those people was Mr. Rogers. You know, he was a really great communicator, someone who spoke clearly and precisely and carefully, but also someone who seemed to have a lot of empathy and ability to listen and hear what other people were trying to get across. And there's been some really neat articles. This is one of my favorite here that I have linked, is the 5 essential truths of communication that Mr. Rogers used. There's been a lot of really cool articles written about how he communicated and what the experts say are good strategies and tips for quality communication. And Mr. Rogers used a lot of these strategies to effectively communicate with children and with adults. And you know, again, this is maybe one of my heroes here, but thinking for you, or maybe he's one of yours as well, thinking for you, who are your kind of heroes and people that you know are really good at communicating, and trying to emulate them and maybe learn a little bit more about how they do it. Maybe that's talking to them and asking specifically about their skills, or even just kind of being mindful of the ways that they use language and the ways that they use their nonverbal skills to communicate information to you. And thinking very carefully about that and how you can put that into practice in your own life. All right, so let's take a look at some of these self-care ideas. I want you to review some of these easy self-care ideas here and some of these 50 ways to take a break. And they don't have to be limited to these lists here, but just thinking really carefully about what speaks to you and what are some things that you might want to learn more about. It could be a video that you watch or an exercise that you do or something that you read. It could be just about anything right now, but what are some things that you'd like to try that maybe you haven't, or some things that you already do, but maybe you want to learn a little bit more about? And thinking about what might be some of the barriers that you have to doing that thing, like thinking about learning how to cook a specific meal. You know, a barrier could be like, what if I mess it up? Like, what if I burn the thing that I'm trying to cook? Or what if it doesn't come out right? What might be some of the barriers to incorporating some of these? And even now, like, what are some of the both external, some of the concerns related to social distancing and the current situation, and then what might be some of the internal barriers? What are some of the things that you're telling yourself? That could be those things like, I'm going to burn my food. And then thinking about what might be some ways that you can overcome these barriers. If it's something like, oh, I don't know how to meditate, or I don't know where to begin, maybe starting by looking online and finding step number 1, and maybe trying something out for the very first time and taking just dipping your toes in and not jumping into the water completely. Or, you know, if you're maybe worried about burning the meal, remembering that, you know, if you do succeed, you're going to have this tasty meal. And even if you don't succeed, even if you burn the meal, it's going to be a learning experience. You're going to have learned something new about how to not do that thing again. So I just encourage you to take a look at the next few pages. The next few pages are going to be some websites, some specific resources that you can check out. And many of them are going to have links to how to do some of these things. Maybe there's going to be some mindfulness websites. There's going to be some websites that have exercise activities, websites that have some educational links and resources so that you can learn some new skills. So I'm going to give you a few minutes here to look through these, and I just want to say thank you again for joining us on this in this presentation. So thank you again, and wish you a really healthy and happy rest of the week and a good weekend, and take care of yourselves.